This video is not about manipulating women, and it is not about acting cold just to get attention. This is about human nature. People respect strength. People respect standards. People respect someone who knows when enough is enough. If a man stays in places where he is ignored, disrespected, used or tested again and again, people stop seeing him as strong. They may still like him. They may still enjoy his attention. But deep down, they do not respect him. Why? Because respect grows when your words and actions match. Before we start, I am currently working on the Stoic Relationship Blueprint for Men course that's coming very soon, and it is built to help you master self-respect, emotional control, boundaries, discipline, and the kind of inner strength that transforms your life and relationships from the inside out. It breaks down everything step by step in a clear, practical way, so you do not just understand these principles for a moment, you grasp them deeply, apply them with confidence, and make them a permanent part of who you are as a man. If you want to become one of the first to know when it drops, and you are ready to stop living in confusion and start leading your relationships with clarity and power, comment the blueprint. Number 1. Neediness kills respect. Neediness kills respect. This is the truth most men resist because it cuts straight through the story they tell themselves when they are stuck on her, when they are checking their phone every 10 minutes, when they are replaying her last message, when they are reading her silence like it is some secret code, when they are pretending they are being loyal even though deep down they know they are being controlled by fear, because what looks like devotion from the inside often looks like weakness from the outside, and she sees it clearly even when you think you are hiding it. She sees the speed of your replies, the way your mood rises and falls with her attention, the way you forgive what you said you would never forgive, the way you accept scraps and call it patience, the way you keep showing up full while she keeps showing up half empty. And the moment she learns that you are more afraid of losing her than you are of losing yourself, the balance shifts, because now she knows she does not have to earn your presence. She only has to manage your hope. And too many men live in exactly that trap, hoping harder, waiting longer, explaining more, giving more chances, lowering standards in real time while telling themselves they are being understanding, when in truth they are abandoning themselves piece by piece. And this is why their dignity starts leaking out of the connection without them even noticing it at first. Because every time she pulls away and you chase, every time she becomes cold and you become softer, every time she delays and you become more available, every time she disrespects your peace and you answer with more effort, you teach her a lesson about your price, and the lesson is painful because it says you can be neglected and still remain. You can be confused and still remain. You can be deprived of clarity and still remain. You can be treated like an option and still remain. And people rarely respect what remains, no matter how badly it is handled. Which is why this situation drains men so deeply, because they know something is wrong. They know the energy is off. They know the pursuit is one-sided. They know their instincts are trying to warn them. Yet they keep bargaining with reality because they are attached to a version of her that shows up only in flashes, a version that appears just enough to keep hope alive, and that hope becomes the chain around their neck. Because once a man depends on occasional warmth from her to settle his mind, he is no longer leading his life. He is being led by appetite, and the solution is not to become cruel, not to become bitter, not to put on an act, but to become disciplined in the place where most men are weak, which is their own mind. Because the first battle is internal, it is the battle between impulse and principle, between panic and poise, between craving and self-command. And the man who wins in that place starts changing everything without saying much at all. He stops reacting instantly. He stops trying to solve what she is creating. He stops handing out emotional access to someone who keeps mishandling it. He starts observing instead of chasing. He starts listening to patterns instead of excuses. He starts asking harder questions, not "how do I get her back?" but "why do I accept conduct that makes me smaller?" Not "what is she thinking?" but "why am I allowing her mixed signals to dictate my peace?" And those questions hurt because they force introspection. They force a man to admit that part of his pain comes from her behavior. Yes, but another part comes from his refusal to face truth early, because she is showing him with actions what she values and what she does not, and he keeps trying to negotiate with evidence as if desire can rewrite reality. Yet the Stoic path demands something far more powerful. It demands that you separate what is in your hands from what is not, that you stop burning energy on controlling her moods, her timing, her loyalty, her honesty, her level of interest, and instead direct that energy toward your own conduct, your own schedule, your own body, your own mission, your own standards, your own speech, your own restraint. Because when a man reclaims authority over his inner world, he stops collapsing every time she changes temperature, and that is where his strength begins to return, not in words, but in regulation, in stillness, in refusal to be dragged into emotional chaos just because she chooses to create it. And that shift is life-changing, because now her silence stops being a command and becomes information. Her distance stops being a crisis and becomes clarity. Her inconsistency stops being a puzzle and becomes proof. And the moment a man learns to read the situation without begging it to become something else, he becomes dangerous in the healthiest sense, because he is no longer available for manipulation. He is no longer easy to bait. He is no longer willing to sacrifice his center just to keep a woman who enjoys the benefits of his attention without carrying the responsibility of genuine effort. And yes, that truth is hard, but it liberates him, because the issue is not simply that she is pulling away. The deeper issue is that he is still reaching toward what is already withdrawing, and there is no dignity in sprinting after someone who keeps showing you that your devotion is useful to her, but your well-being is not important to her. So the solution is brutally simple and deeply transformative. Slow down. Stop rewarding poor treatment with more access. Stop translating her confusion into your obligation. Stop making her uncertainty the center of your life. Regain control of your mornings, your sleep, your work, your training, your attention, your language, your posture, your decisions. Sit with discomfort without numbing it through fantasy. Let the discomfort teach you where you have been dependent. Let silence teach you where you have been afraid. Let distance teach you what she has truly been offering, and then act with dignity, because a man becomes respectable the moment he values his inner order more than her temporary approval. And once he reaches that point, his life begins to turn in his favor, because he is no longer begging to be chosen by someone who is careless with his spirit. He is choosing himself with discipline, with patience, with self-command. And from there he starts becoming the kind of man whose peace is expensive, whose attention is earned, whose presence is not common, and whose future is no longer chained to the whims of a woman who confuses access to him with ownership of him. And that is exactly why the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men matters so much right now, because it is filled with timeless Stoic principles that help you break free from neediness, rebuild your self-respect, master your emotions, and start transforming your life immediately. And it is linked in the comments for every man who knows he cannot keep living like this. It is now also available in audiobook version, which means you can listen to this life-changing knowledge while taking a walk, jogging, driving, training, or sitting alone with your thoughts, letting these lessons sink into your mind until strength, clarity, and discipline stop being ideas and start becoming your nature. And the best part is that once you get it, it is yours forever. So you will always have access to this powerful wisdom whenever life tests you, whenever a woman confuses you, whenever your mind starts slipping, and whenever you need to return to the truths that put you back in control. Number 2. Standards create value. Standards create value. That sentence sounds simple until life tests it in the exact place where most men fold. Because it is easy to talk about boundaries when things are calm, when affection is present, when messages are warm, when she is consistent, when there is no tension in the air. But the real measure of a man appears when she changes, when she becomes distant, when her effort drops, when her words stop matching her actions, when she starts keeping him close enough to use his attention, but far enough to avoid responsibility. Because that is the point where empty talk gets exposed, and countless men expose themselves there without realizing it. They say they want honesty but accept vagueness. They say they want mutual effort but tolerate one-sided investment. They say they value peace but remain inside a cycle of stress. They say they know their worth yet keep negotiating with treatment that insults that very worth. And the reason this matters so much is because value is never created by what a man claims. Value is created by what he protects, what he refuses, what he walks away from, what he does not permit to live in his life long term. And she studies this more closely than he thinks, because a woman watches whether his standards are real or decorative, whether his boundaries exist only in speeches or whether they have muscle, whether he is guided by principle or by appetite. And when she sees that he keeps bending every rule he set, the moment she gives him a little attention, she stops taking his words seriously, because he has already shown that access to him costs very little. And this is where many men ruin their own leverage in relationships, and then blame the outcome without accepting their role in creating it. Because standards are not there to impress her, they are there to preserve you. They are there to keep your life ordered. They are there to make sure you do not keep inviting disorder into your mind and calling it love. And the Stoic approach here is not abstract. It is intensely practical. It says that your peace depends less on what she promises and more on what you permit. It says that your suffering increases when your expectations are high, but your standards are low. It says that self-respect is not an emotion you wait to have one day. It is a practice you enforce in decisions, in timing, in tone, in presence, in absence, in what you respond to and what you do not, in what you chase and what you release. And that is why the man with standards becomes powerful even before he says very much, because his life has structure. His attention is not available on demand. His time is not cheap. His body is trained. His schedule is full. His emotions are under command. His speech is measured. And when she comes into contact with that kind of man, she knows she is dealing with someone who cannot be led around by inconsistency. Someone who will not sit there explaining his value to a woman who benefits from it while pretending not to see it. Someone who understands that attraction without respect is unstable, that chemistry without character becomes poison, and that affection without discipline turns into self-betrayal. And this is why standards change a man's life far beyond one relationship, because they stop him from living as a hostage to desire. They stop him from making exceptions for every pretty face that brings confusion. They stop him from handing out the best of himself to someone who shows very little care for the consequences of her conduct. And let us be honest, many men watching this know exactly what that looks like in their own lives. They know what it is like when she leaves messages unanswered for hours while being active elsewhere, when she gives just enough warmth to keep them invested, but never enough clarity to let them rest, when she returns only when she senses them pulling back, when she expects understanding for behavior she would never accept from them, when she enjoys their steadiness but offers instability in return. And the painful part is not just what she is doing. The painful part is that they keep allowing it because they fear the emptiness that comes with closing the door. But that fear is exactly where their new life begins. Because once a man chooses standards over cravings, he begins to rebuild his identity from the inside out. He proves to himself that loneliness will not break him, that uncertainty will not own him, That desire will not overrule his judgment, and that proof changes his posture in every area of life. He becomes clearer at work, calmer under pressure, less needy in conversation, less reactive in conflict, less willing to entertain nonsense, more capable of delayed gratification, more committed to what is solid instead of what is merely stimulating. And women notice this immediately, not because he performs it, but because grounded men do not leak desperation. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not scramble when someone acts out. They do not beg for basic decency. They do not confuse being chosen with being respected. And that is why standards create value, because they turn a man from an open door into a guarded gate, from someone who is easy to reach into someone whose presence means something, from someone who asks for better treatment into someone who simply removes himself when better treatment is absent. And that distinction is everything, because once a man stops arguing with conduct and starts responding to it with decisive action, he becomes harder to exploit, harder to confuse, harder to drag into draining cycles, and his whole life starts moving upward as a result, because energy once wasted on overthinking her now goes into building himself, into training, into reading, into work, into saving, into purpose, into brotherhood, into spiritual stability, into the daily habits that make him formidable over time. And that is the deeper gift of standards. They do not just protect a relationship, they protect a future. They stop a man from spending years in circles with a woman who thrives on his patience but contributes little to his peace. They remind him that love is not proven by how much disrespect he can absorb. They remind him that his role is not to rescue someone from her own patterns while drowning in the process. They remind him that compassion without boundaries becomes self-neglect, and so the solution is as challenging as it is liberating. Define what matters. Define what conduct disqualifies a person from your inner circle. Define how much inconsistency you will tolerate. Define what honesty, effort, and respect look like in practice, and then live by those definitions when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because that is the price of real self-respect. And once a man pays that price, he stops living in reaction and starts living by design. He stops asking whether she will rise to meet him and starts asking whether her conduct deserves continued access to his life. And that question alone can transform him, because it pulls him out of passivity and returns him to leadership over his own existence, where he belongs. Number 3, walking away shows strength. Most men do not understand this until life corners them into a situation that strips them of excuses. Because as long as she gives them just enough attention to keep hope alive, they keep telling themselves that staying is noble, that enduring is proof of depth, that patience will somehow turn confusion into commitment. But what is really happening is much uglier than they want to admit, because she is showing them with precision what place they hold in her priorities, and instead of reading the evidence, they keep trying to rewrite it with effort. And that is exactly where their power drains out of them, because a man who cannot leave becomes predictable, and the moment he becomes predictable to a woman who enjoys being chased more than she enjoys being accountable, he becomes easy to manage, easy to delay, easy to keep in emotional limbo, and he starts living in a constant state of tension where every text, every pause, every vague statement, every inconsistent gesture begins to control his peace. And that is not love, that is dependence dressed up as loyalty, and deep down he knows it, because he knows what it is like to go to sleep with his mind racing, to wake up and check his phone before he even settles himself, to replay conversations while trying to find a hidden meaning that is not there, to blame himself for standards he never broke, while she moves through the connection with convenience and half-effort. And the painful truth is that many men stay because leaving forces them to face themselves. It forces them to admit that they tolerated too much, that they kept hoping long after clarity had already arrived, that they were not trapped by her alone, but by their fear of emptiness. And that is why walking away is not just a move in a relationship. It is a spiritual correction. It is a return to order. It is a decision to stop violating your own judgment for the sake of temporary access to a woman who benefits from your steadiness while offering uncertainty in return. And this is where disciplined thinking becomes essential, because the first thing a man must do is stop asking what she might do next and start asking what is actually within his control today. How he speaks, how he spends his hours, how he handles silence, how he regulates impulse, how quickly he reacts, how long he tolerates confusion, how firmly he enforces consequences when his standards are crossed, because strength is not noise, it is governance of the self. It is the ability to stand in discomfort without collapsing into pursuit. It is the ability to let reality be ugly without rushing to paint over it. It is the ability to accept that her inconsistency is already an answer, and once a man internalizes that, he becomes hard to shake, because now he is no longer bargaining with facts. He is no longer trying to rescue the connection by sacrificing his center. He is no longer offering premium devotion to a woman giving discount effort. And when he leaves from that place, calmly, cleanly, decisively, something profound happens inside him, because he proves to himself that his life does not end when access ends, that his worth does not vanish because one woman fails to value it, that his peace is not dependent on being chosen by someone who cannot meet him with the same seriousness he brings, and that proof changes his posture in every area of life. He speaks with more clarity, he works with more focus, he trains with more discipline, he carries less desperation in his body, and he begins to notice how many parts of his life were shrinking under the weight of one draining situation. And this is why walking away is such a turning point, because it is not only about leaving her, it is about leaving behind the version of yourself that kept accepting less than you knew you deserved. And once that version dies, the next chapter of your life can finally begin. Number 4. Detachment protects your peace. This is the lesson men resist because they confuse detachment with indifference, when in reality detachment is one of the purest forms of self-respect a man can practice, because it does not mean that he stops caring. It means that he stops handing his nervous system to someone who has shown she is careless with it. It means that he stops allowing her moods, her delays, her mixed signals, her hot and cold energy, and her convenient reappearances to dictate whether his day is stable or ruined. And any man who has been caught in that cycle knows exactly how brutal it is, because it is never just about a woman not texting back. It is about the loss of inner order that follows, the distracted work, the broken concentration, the restless nights, the endless urge to decode tone and timing, the false hope every time she gives a little warmth, the disappointment every time she pulls back again. And what makes it worse is that he often sees the pattern clearly, yet still remains inside it, because attachment keeps telling him that one more conversation, one more chance, one more display of patience will finally produce the version of her he keeps imagining. But disciplined thought cuts through fantasy and says something far more useful, that he does not need to control her to protect himself. He only needs to control his response, his access, his availability, his standards, and his interpretation of what he is seeing. Because detachment begins when a man stops taking every shift in her behavior as a verdict on his value and starts seeing it as information about her character, her readiness, her priorities, and her level of discipline. And this matters because many men waste years personalizing conduct that has very little to do with them and everything to do with the kind of woman she chooses to be. The kind who wants attention without responsibility, closeness without consistency, influence without accountability. And once a man sees that clearly, he stops romanticizing dysfunction. He stops calling stress chemistry. He stops calling uncertainty passion. He stops calling repeated disappointment a deep connection, and instead he starts building a life so grounded that unstable behavior loses its power over him. He keeps his routines, he guards his mornings, he trains his body, he sharpens his mind, he limits emotional overexposure. He does not chase clarity from someone committed to confusion, and over time that way of living creates a kind of inner weight that people notice immediately, because a detached man is not easy to provoke, not easy to manipulate, not easy to keep suspended between hope and frustration, and that changes the entire dynamic of his life. Not because he becomes cold, but because he becomes governed. He chooses his thoughts instead of being dragged by them. He sits with discomfort instead of rushing to escape it through pursuit. He accepts loss where necessary instead of living in denial. And this is exactly how a painful situation starts turning in his favor, because once he stops feeding chaos with attention, he recovers the energy that was being drained from him and puts it where it belongs, into purpose, into growth, into discipline, into peace, into becoming the kind of man who is no longer impressed by superficial charm when it comes wrapped in instability. And that is the real transformation, because now he is not asking how to keep her. He is asking whether her conduct deserves space in the life he is building, and that question elevates everything. It elevates his standards, his relationships, his time, his focus, and his future. Because the man who masters detachment does not become empty, he becomes free. And freedom is exactly what allows him to stop living at the mercy of women and people who thrive on confusion, and start living with the calm authority of someone who knows that peace, once earned, must never be traded for attention. Most men spend years getting drained by the same patterns because nobody teaches them the truths that restore self-respect, discipline, clarity, and peace. And that is exactly why the Stoic Relationship Blueprint ebook for men matters so much right now. It is filled with timeless Stoic principles that will transform your life immediately, and it is now also available in audiobook version, so you can absorb this life-changing wisdom while taking a walk, jogging, driving, or training, instead of wasting one more day trapped in confusion. The truth is, the world profits when men stay weak, distracted, emotionally dependent, and easy to control, which is why knowledge like this hits so hard once you finally get hold of it. If you are ready to rise, comment, "I choose clarity," like this video, and subscribe so more men can find these truths before they lose more years to regret, self-betrayal, and empty chasing. The ebook is linked in the comments, and once you get it, this knowledge is yours for life, ready to steady your mind every time life, people, or desire try to pull you off your path.